Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Laura Schroff knows what it's like to live on the streets, at least vicariously. Many years ago, she befriended a then 11-year-old boy who was panhandling the same thoroughfares she used to walk. She bought him some food, and though she would hardly convey in this way, I am convinced that in that moment, the axis of the world shifted. Some 25 years later, Laura and that little boy, now a grown man, are still friends, or more like mother and son, I should say. Ms. Schroff is an international bestseller with An Invisible Thread among her best books. It challenges people like you and me to stop to consider the invisible threads that bind us. Threads that hold the potential to do nothing less than alter the course of humanity. Over a career that has exceeded 3 decades, Ms. Schroff helped launch USA Today. She also helped debut several magazines and is considered by many to be an invaluable mentor and leader. But perhaps her best attribute is in realizing that we all matter. We all count. That includes Jeremy and Michael, myself, and all the other men who wander into Guiding Light looking for a spark that might reignite their lives the way they were intended to be lived. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce to you the incomparable Laura Schroff.
In an instant, your life can change. I'm sure it's happened to so many of you who are here this evening. In fact, sometimes while it's happening, we don't even know it. That instant occurred in my life when I met Maurice Mazak at the age of 11, and it's incredible to think that we've been on our own invisible thread journey for over 25 years. An invisible thread is not only the name of my first book, but it's also an ancient Chinese proverb. An invisible thread connects those who are destined to meet, regardless of time, place, and circumstance. The thread may stretch or tangle, but it will never break. And it is that journey that's given me the great honor to be your invited speaker tonight at Guiding Light Mission's Annual Banquet and Fundraiser. Tonight's purpose is so important because we all have the chance to celebrate and ignite every spark in this room and to see firsthand how Guiding Light Mission is making a difference in the lives of those men who need your support the most and are living right here in your own backyard. What moves and energizes me the most is to be surrounded by caring people just like all of you who seize the moment to help. Tonight, you can spark a change by donating, no matter the size of your donation, or volunteering by offering your talents, treasures, resources, and time, as well as always keeping these men in your daily prayers. While sharing the love of Christ with those in need, every spark tonight will continue to provide service for those men who are suffering. Through the guiding light of God's Spirit, Guiding Light partners with individuals to fulfill their God-given potential through rescue, recovery, and re-engagement in the community. James, and I'm not sure where you're sitting, but thank you so much for your very lovely introduction and for being an inspiration to all of us this evening. While I truly believe that God will never give us more than we can handle, I think it's fair to say that you've received your fair share of heartache and heartbreak. I hope you recognize, along with Jeremy and also Michael, how you're so strong and so resilient. I would also love to extend my deepest thanks to Mr. Ray, Starla McDermott, and I think Mary Ann Sabo. I think she's here tonight as well. She was very helpful. And to everyone at Guiding Mission, the board of directors, as well as my deepest gratitude and thanks to the generous sponsors and donors and to all of you who are here tonight and have helped make this very beautiful and very special evening take place. Each and every one of you are a spark that continues to save lives. Honestly, I am so honored to have the opportunity to share my own invisible thread story with all of you, which reinforces how one small act of kindness can make an enormous difference, and in some cases, it can even change or save the life of another person. Now I'd love to take you back to September 1st, 1986, the day that I walked past Maurice Mazak on a New York City street corner. At the time, I lived and worked in Manhattan, and I passed panhandlers every day. But the day that I saw Maurice, it was very different. It was the first time I'd ever seen a young boy alone with his hand out. And as I passed, he said, "Excuse me, lady, do you have any spare change? I'm hungry." And I said no, and I kept walking. But then something made me stop. I literally froze in the middle of Broadway with his words ringing in my ears. That life-changing instant to turn around, and those three simple words, "I am hungry," changed both of our lives forever. I went back to the boy and said to him that I didn't want to give him any money, but if he was hungry, I would take him to McDonald's, and I would buy him something to eat. And for some strange reason, I asked if I could join him. At first, Maurice was puzzled. As a panhandler, he was used to people giving him a nickel, a dime, a quarter, and on a really good day, even $1. But he was surprised when I asked if I could join him for lunch, because more often than not, people treated him as if he were invisible. But he was hungry, and he said sure. Now, when I met Maurice, I did not know how dire his situation actually was. At lunch, I found out that he had not had anything to eat in 2 full days. I also discovered at the very young age of only 11, he had no choice but to fend for himself. You see, unfortunately, Maurice was trapped in a desperate cycle of poverty, drugs, and violence. His father was a gang member, a thug, and a drug dealer who left when he was only 6. And his mother, Darcella, whom he loved so dearly, unfortunately, she was addicted to heroin and crack. It's hard to believe when I met him, he didn't own a toothbrush, a bar of soap, or any of the bare essentials we all take so for granted. While we were having lunch, I remember wondering, how is it possible that a child so young can be on a street corner begging for food? I mean, we live in America. How can this be happening? Over lunch, we realized we lived only 2 blocks apart, yet we came from 2 vastly different worlds. Maurice lived at the Bryan Hotel, which back then was one of the most dangerous, drug-infested shelter hotels in all of New York City. He lived in 1 room with his mother, his grandmother, his 2 sisters, his aunt, 2 baby cousins, and uncles who came and went. In one corner, there was a refrigerator with a television that sat on top, and on the opposite side, there was a chair. While the children slept on the 2 single beds, the adults fed their drug habits into the early morning hours and then slept the day away. As a child, Maurice can't remember food in the fridge, only water and a box of baking soda for the adults to cook the drugs. When lunch was over, I felt compelled to spend a little bit more time with him, so I asked him if he wanted to take a walk to the park. I knew instantly he was a really good kid who just so happened to be stuck in a really hard, bad life. After spending the afternoon together, it was time to go our separate ways. But over the next few days, I couldn't seem to get this image of this child out of my mind and his sweet and trusting eyes. So on Thursday night after work, I decided to try to find him. What I did not know was Maurice was really hungry that night, and he thought maybe if he stood on the same corner, he would see me again, and I might invite him to dinner. And as I turned the corner, there he was standing in the same spot, in the same burgundy sweats. I asked him if he was hungry, and he told me he was starving, so I took him to dinner. While we were having dinner, I said to him, "I've got a great idea." I said, "How would you like to go out to dinner next Monday night? We can meet at 7, and I'll take you to the Hard Rock Cafe." Now Maurice gave me his biggest smile, and then he asked if he could wear the clothes that he had on because they were the only ones that he owned. On Monday night, when Maurice arrived, his burgundy sweats were clean and his face sparkled, and I could tell he had made every attempt to be dressed for this very special occasion. That evening, he had a huge steak, and we agreed we'd meet the following Monday, and we wound up meeting every Monday for the next 4 years and hundreds of times thereafter. Together, we forged an unplanned path that transformed both of our lives. Now, my family, my friends, and my colleagues all urged me to be careful. They felt that I was putting myself in potential danger. But there was something that drew me to Maurice, and I decided to follow my heart. Now, our heart is not only that organ that keeps our blood pumping and keeps us healthy and alive, but it was in that moment that I had a tug at my heart. I'm sure all of you know exactly how it feels when you have that tug at your heart. Now, I must admit, there were moments when I wondered what led me to that corner, what made me stop and go back, and most importantly, what led me to Maurice. I believe it was no accident that Maurice and we were destined to meet. It has always brought me an enormous amount of comfort to know that my beloved mother, who was my rock and passed away at the very young age of only 47 when I was 25, has always been my guardian angel, high in the sky, pulling strings and watching over me from that very, very special place we all call heaven. Now, when I think of angels, what first comes to mind are those beautiful, floating, fluffy spirits with those gorgeous white wings. That's definitely how I envision my mother floating throughout heaven. But she seems to carry a clipboard and she checks off all the things that she needs to do for the day. I also think of angels as our protectors and sometimes our messengers and our guides. And it has always brought me an enormous amount of comfort to know that there is an angel always with me. In fact, I tell this story in Angels on Earth of how I know my mother has been by my side every step of the way. In fact, I have no doubt that she is with me tonight. She seems to show up at all of my speaking engagements. What I've learned throughout my journey, there are people on earth who are angels too, and they are those very people who are carrying out such godly tasks as charity, compassion, forgiveness, assistance, and most importantly, love. Now, like Maurice, I too came from an abusive household, but I couldn't compare my childhood to the hard life that Maurice faced. My father was a really good man with a very, very big heart, but unfortunately, when he drank, his darkest demons came out, and he would become extremely destructive, not only with my mother, but also with my poor younger brother, Frank. Unfortunately, like so many children who grow up in an abusive alcoholic family, it's something that is never discussed outside the family. It's an unspoken and unwritten rule. As a child, and even as an adult, I never discussed this part of my life, not even with my closest friends. As a child, I was too afraid. And as a teenager and a young adult, a young woman, I was too embarrassed. When I began to work on An Invisible Thread, it never dawned on me to write about this dark and painful time in my life. But one night, while I was writing the chapter of taking Maurice to a baseball game, I thought about my sweet brother Frank and how much he loved his mitt, and the day that my father destroyed it. And before I knew it, I wrote the mitt chapter, and I started to intertwine my own childhood into the story. At the time, I didn't understand why, but now I believe it is an important part of my book. Now, unlike Maurice, not having food or a warm bed to sleep in was never part of my chaotic world. Although my father was an alcoholic, he always maintained a job, but his demons were extremely destructive towards him and enormously painful for my entire family. But both my parents worked really hard to make sure that there was enough food on the table for their family. So I will be forever grateful, and I will always credit both of my parents for my strong work ethic and my determination for a better life. I also believe that anything is possible if you're focused, passionate, determined, and willing to work hard. But most of all, you must always have a dream, and you must always keep your faith. It's our faith that will get us through our difficult days, and it's our faith that will bring us back to our good days. But you must always have that dream. Which brings me back to Maurice. On the 5th Monday of getting together, I thought it would be great to make Maurice a home-cooked meal, so I invited him to my apartment. Maurice was reluctant. He was sure that this was the night that he would find out what I really wanted from him. He was positive that my kindness came with a price. So that evening he came prepared with a box cutter in his pocket. And as he sat on the couch, I could see that he was frightened. So I explained to him why I invited him to my home. I told him that I considered him a friend, and I explained how friendship was built on trust. But I wanted to make sure that he understood if anything was ever missing from my apartment, we would no longer be friends. Maurice looked at me with this very puzzled expression. So I said to him, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And he said to me, "Miss Laura, you just want to be my friend, that's it?" And I was like, "Well, yes," I said, "of course." And with that, he stood up, he put his hand out, and he said, "Miss Laura, a deal is a deal." And that evening, our handshake solidified our friendship, which was built on trust, and a bond that would continue to grow for over a quarter of a century. That evening, our conversation reminded me of one of my most favorite Ernest Hemingway quotes. The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. So simple, yet so profound. By inviting Maurice to my home, he now knew he could trust me. And in doing so, I learned that I could now trust my new little found friend. You see, friendship is something so many of us do take for granted. But for children like Maurice, and for so many of the men who walk through the doors of Guiding Light Mission, having a friend or someone who understands their needs and their circumstances is not always part of their hard and complicated lives. I'm sure you will all agree. Everyone needs to have someone in their life that they can trust, and more importantly, someone that they can depend on. Over the weeks and months, we continued to get together during the week on Monday nights, and whenever possible on weekends. One Saturday, Maurice called from my lobby phone, and he asked if I could take him to lunch. He told me he was hungry. We went to our favorite place, and while we were having lunch, I found out that he had not had anything to eat in 2 days, and I told him we needed to figure it out. So I suggested on Monday nights I could give him money, but he'd have to be very careful as to how he spent it. Or, if he preferred, we could go to the supermarket together, and I would buy him all the things he'd love to eat, and I would make him lunch. I would leave it with my doorman, and on his way to school, he could swing by and he could pick it up. Maurice looked at me and he said to me, "Miss Laura, if you make me lunch, are you going to put it in a brown paper bag?" Well, now this time I was really confused. I said, "Do you want your lunch in a brown paper bag or not?" And he said to me, "Miss Laura, I don't want your money." He said, "I want my lunch in a brown paper bag, because when kids come to school and they have their lunch in a brown paper bag, that means someone cares about them." So Maurice taught me the true definition of lunch in a brown paper bag. The bag is only brown paper, but what's put inside it is something called love. I certainly believe that everyone who is here tonight knows firsthand how some of the greatest blessings in our lives can come in the simplest forms. What I've learned is we can be the change we want to see in the world, even if it is just one person, one spark, or one small act of kindness at a time. But tonight, I am preaching to the choir. After all, you have all seen firsthand how dedicated the staff is at Guiding Light Mission and how tirelessly they work to carve out programs that will create full-time employment, independence, sustainable living for courageous men who seek guidance at Guiding Light Mission. Guiding Light is doing everything that they possibly can to help these men who want to face their addictions and demons, and for those who just are having a really bad time, by helping them to get off the streets and helping them to get onto payroll. James, Jeremy, and Michael are all a perfect example of how Guiding Light is changing lives, and how, as donors, you are all the spark. Their stories are just one of many. In fact, over 900 plus men have gone through Guiding Light's program and have secured full-time employment. Guiding Light offers services for addiction and habitual homelessness. Their services are unique, and they are treating the whole body, mind, and spirit. Everyone at Guiding Light is incredibly excited about their new era and have honed in on 3 programs, which are the 3 pillars of light: Guiding Light Back to Work program, the recovery program, and the job post program. Each pillar and each program creates a path that is a rescue option for a man in need. Most importantly, each program requires a different level of investment, but all lead to the same place: a renewed faith, steady employment, and safe and affordable housing. I'm sure back in 1928, when Guiding Light was first established by West Fulton Mission, by John Van D. Water, he never could have envisioned this sparked, filled, beautiful room, and how West Fulton Mission would ultimately change the lives of so many men in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Back in 1986, I hoped to do the same for Maurice, and I wondered if I was making a difference. And then one day we went out to my sister Annette's house on Long Island. Now, Maurice had never been outside of New York City, so he was very excited, but as you can imagine, he was also scared. Excuse me. Little did we know that this would be a turning point in his life. Maurice absolutely loved playing on the swings with Colette, Derek, and Brooke, and even going for a bike ride with Derek. But driving home that evening, I asked him what his favorite part of the day was. And he told me he loved how everyone was sitting in that special room where we had dinner. He said everybody was laughing and talking so much and sharing so much love across the table. He told me he thought the food was great, but what he loved most, again, how everyone was just having a great time. And then he said to me, "Miss Laura, someday when I grow up, I want to have a room just like that." And I realized for the very first time that I was making a difference and that Maurice was starting to dream. I mentioned earlier in my speech how anything is possible if you're focused, passionate, determined, and willing to work hard. But most importantly, you must always have a dream. Everyone at Guiding Light Mission, every spark in this room tonight, and most importantly, every man who has the courage and the strength to walk through the doors of Guiding Light has a dream. They know Guiding Light is not the end of their journey, but it is just the beginning. Back in 1986, I never could have imagined how a simple dinner around a large dining room table could be so life-changing for a little boy from a shelter hotel. Today, Maurice is 44, so you can only imagine how old I am. And he's married to his wife, Michelle, and they have a wonderful family of their own. When you walk into Maurice's cramped apartment, he does not have a living room. He has a dining room with a large dining room table where he and his family love to hang out. In fact, that young boy in the video who is so cute is Maurice's son, Jaleel. And the robbers are Maurice and his other sons. And I don't know how many of you saw that rat in Central Park, but that just so happened to show up in time for the video shoot. That was not planted. Says a lot about Central Park. What brings me so much joy is to see how a cycle of generations of drug abuse, violence, and hunger in Maurice's family has finally been broken. Although it was always my dream to have a family of my own, I guess it was just not meant to be. And then one day Maurice came into my life. Most often, these unexpected blessings are when we decide to go beyond ourselves and our own familiar world and reach out to another person. Yet so often these opportunities are right in front of us. All we have to do is slow down, pause for a moment, open up our eyes and our hearts to our surroundings to see that these blessings are in our path. As I look back on the early days of getting together with Maurice, I was teaching him simple things like how to use a fork and knife, how to bake chocolate chip cookies, and believe it or not, even how to blow his nose. Maurice was starting to see a different world, the world he preferred to be a part of, and my new little found friend was giving me a new perspective on my own life. He helped me improve my world. Maurice gave me the most amazing gift, the chance to look at my own childhood in a very different light. Maurice actually taught me forgiveness, and he helped me appreciate the blessings I had as a child. Our story is not one of how a successful woman saved a young African-American boy, but in fact, it's the story of how we saved each other. I cannot emphasize enough how my own experience and my unlikely friendship with Maurice taught me how important it is to throw a lifeline to someone in need, or to grab hold of it if it's thrown to you. Now, I'm not sure if I threw that lifeline or Maurice, but we have both held on to it. Now, for a moment, let's all try to imagine how many beautiful and meaningful lifelines Guiding Light has thrown over so many years. Their lifelines, in combination with the mission's commitment and passion, have changed, and more importantly, have saved the lives of so many men who will be forever grateful for giving them this opportunity to reset their life stage. When I think of that saying, "What won't kill you will make you stronger," I know James and all of his brothers at Guiding Light Mission are an inspiration to all of the men who walk through the doors at the mission. I would love to encourage each and every one of you to think about your own invisible thread connections and to appreciate the love, the goodness, and the support you do have in your lives, and continue to share threads of kindness. I have no doubt there must be so many beautiful invisible thread connections in this room this evening. I so believe if we honor and activate these invisible thread connections through kindness, generosity, and support, there is a ripple effect. It ripples outward, and tonight is a perfect example of that. If there's truth in the saying that we are all students of life, then I believe we can all learn to be a little kinder and a little bit more compassionate. We can teach others to be kind, but we must lead by example. May God bless all of you, and thank you again for giving me the great honor to be able to be a part of such an incredibly beautiful and lovely event that celebrates all that the Guiding Light Mission is doing and all of the sparks that are here tonight and making a difference. So God bless you, and thank you again.